Balance is the ability of the body to maintain the center of gravity, or the body maintaining postural control to prevent falling. Balance is important in everyday life and many athletic activities, and is essential to avoiding injury. Injuries are a constant concern for athletes and coaches. Often athletes aim to improve their balance with specific exercises. The current literature available investigating balance is extensive. The literature found that elderly women experienced a greater decrease in balance than men, and also that the elderly found it more difficult to maintain postural control when the environment was manipulated. The only study investigating the balance differences between males and females found elderly women actually had slightly better balance than the elderly men. Research involving balance differences between injured and uninjured participants found the injured participants always had decreased balance compared to the uninjured participants. Research investigating balance differences between participants' dominant and non-dominant lower limb found no significant difference. Studies involving the effect of balance training and exercises to improve balance found this was an effective way to increase balance. When comparing balance of athletes involved in different sports, there was no difference between gymnasts and soccer players, but there was a difference for basketball players, who had poorer balance than the other athletes. Several studies found balance was impaired after exercise and fatiguing activities. If coaches can identify balance differences between males and females, this could be a useful way to develop balance programs specific to individuals with poor balance who are at risk of injury. The aim of this investigation was to compare balance between males and females standing on the dominant lower limb. It was hypothesized there will be a difference in balance between females and males. This study involved 17 exercise and sports science students who volunteered to participate. A cross-sectional study design was used for this study. Participants completed the balance test during one session on one day. The participants' age, height, and mass were collected the previous day for another study and were carried over to this study. Participants completed the testing in a randomized order. The participants were all instructed to follow strict protocols before balance testing began. The balance test required participants to stand on their dominant lower limb for 30 seconds. An AMTI force plate was used in this study. To determine if there was a difference between females and males' balance, an independent t-test was conducted. Statistical significance was set at a p-value of 0.05. The results of this study showed females had greater displacement than males. The statistical analysis showed the results to be significant. This supports the hypothesis that there is a difference between females and males' balance. This figure highlights the balance data that was collected. The findings of this study agree with the studies that investigated balance in the elderly, that found elderly women had a greater decrease in balance than elderly men. This study is supported by previous research that found when comparing balance between dominant and non-dominant lower limbs, there is no difference. Some possible limitations of this study should be noted. Some of the participants may have been suffering fatigue from previous exercise testing. This study only used a small sample size, which may not have produced a significant result. Some of the participants had lower limb injuries, which may affect the results of this study. And also the protocols of this study may not have been followed by all participants exactly, as this wasn't monitored during all testing. There was a significant difference between females' and males' balance. Women had greater displacement than the men when comparing the dominant lower limb. The risk of injury is a constant concern, especially for elite athletes. Coaches and athletes try to reduce the risk of injury as much as possible through prevention. If exercise scientists and the like can identify balance differences between genders, they may be able to identify athletes with poor balance who are at risk of injury and prevent this through balance training.